Welcome to Mindset Matters Book Club YouTube channel. Please subscribe and like to hear new book summaries. We are diving deep today and, well, not into dry history or academic policy, but into something profoundly personal. A toolkit, really.
That's the perfect word for it.
We're focusing on Elizabeth Smart's incredible book, Detours, Hope and Growth After Life's Hardest Turns.
And our mission in this deep dive is, I think, so vital. This book is essentially a manual for navigating life's most crushing setbacks.
Right.
The kind of unexpected turns that don't just, delay you. They completely derail the entire future you thought was guaranteed.
So our goal is to really distill the author's personal step-by-step roadmap for resilience and healing for you, the learner.
Exactly.
And the central metaphor she uses is just. It's so instantly relatable, especially when you're facing a massive life shift. She paints this picture of life that we all sort of have in our heads.
The beautiful, shiny, newly paved road.
Yes. A straightforward, predictable route that's leading toward homecoming, which she defines it as a life full of love, fulfillment, and safety.
The destination we all set our GPS for.
Precisely. But that planned path is, well, inevitably it gets interrupted.
And she breaks that interruption into two distinct forms. First, you have the rock slides.
The big ones.
The big ones. The sudden, catastrophic, and traumatic events. I mean, the violent moments that completely block the way and just leave the landscape totally unrecognizable.
And then there are the roadblocks.
Right, which are different. They're the immovable, ongoing facts or even the negative mental states that keep us paralyzed, just waiting for a path that's never going to clear.
So when a rock slide hits, you're not just delayed. You're forcibly shunted onto a detour.
And the entire book is a guide for that. It's about how to take decisive ownership of that diversion.
It's about forging a new, sometimes brutal and completely uncharted path toward a new idea of what homecoming even is.
She really emphasizes that even if the physical route is closed, that destination fulfillment, it's achievable. You just need a different map.
I think what's so compelling is the context she sets right from the beginning. This isn't just another trauma memoir.
Not at all. I mean, it is that, of course, but it's fundamentally driven by the one single constant question she's been asked for 2 decades.
How can you possibly be okay?
Exactly. By strangers, by supporters, everyone. And this book is her comprehensive answer.
And the process, as she lays it out, it's not simple, but it all comes down to developing an internal compass and reclaiming this fierce personal agency.
It really is a toolkit just disguised as a reflection on survival.
Okay, so let's unpack that initial path, the one that was so violently disrupted. She details the life she envisioned for herself as a young girl, and it was almost storybook perfect.
Absolutely. The planned path was mapped out so clearly in her mind. It started with graduating high school, then straight to college, specifically to pursue music.
Harp performance, of all things.
Harp performance, which tells you so much about her inherent sensitivity and, her creative passion.
And then after that,
it was followed by the handsome and kind husband, the teaching career, the kids, a life built on these visible, stable cornerstones, community, a deeply held faith.
and a powerful, reliable family structure.
Exactly. It was a road so straightforward that she had no reason to ever look down or worry about potholes.
And crucially, that entire vision, that planned road, it led straight toward a life full of love. That was her internal definition of home.
But the first cataclysmic rock slide, which hit in June of 2002, was, well, it was horrific and immediate.
The change was just violent, immediate, absolutely. At 14 years old, she's kidnapped by Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee.
And the book doesn't shy away from the reality of it. 9 months of captivity. It involved constant torture, starvation, sexual abuse.
Right.
The physical environment changed, yes, but the mental aftermath she describes is maybe even more chilling.
It's like she didn't just fall into a black hole. She described it as hitting the ground in this cold, lifeless mental landscape full of sudden drop-offs and jagged rocks where safety used to be.
The expected road had it dissolved. It turned into this unforgiving, hostile territory.
So her initial coping mechanism was naturally just pure primal survival.
Right. She was clinging to hope. The constant image in her mind was that her family would find her.
And she realized, looking back, that the rescue in March 2003 was actually fast. I mean, the physical extraction from her captors was swift and decisive.
But navigating that treacherous new mental landscape, that inner wasteland the trauma created, that took years and years.
The body was rescued, but the mental rerouting was a marathon.
She uses that incredibly vivid language. She calls trauma a sucker punch that knocks you flat on your back.
And there's no preparation for that.
None. These rock slides force an immediate, stark, and really a binary choice. You either spiral downward into self-destruction, or you somehow summon this immense strength to pull yourself up, get back on your feet, and start forging a new, difficult path forward.
One step at a time.
It's the difference between being a victim of the punch and becoming the architect of your own recovery.
But this is where the book really shows its power as a toolkit, not just a memoir. Because she presents a second rock slide. One that, well, it's less intuitive than a kidnapping, but she found it equally devastating.
The divorce of her parents.
Years later.
Yeah, the timing is crucial. This happened long after her physical recovery, about 6 years before she wrote the book. And it came in the form of a 6 a.m. phone call from her father.
And the news in that single sentence, Elizabeth, I'm leaving the church, I'm divorcing your mother, and I'm gay.
Okay.
I mean, that wasn't just news. That was the bedrock of her emotional life cracking wide open.
The book explicitly identifies this as the playing out of her deepest and longest held fear.
But why? I mean, on the surface.
Because her parents' partnership was more than just a marriage to her. It was the cornerstone of her entire emotional life, the stable support system, the anchor she had clung to during the original trauma's long aftermath.
So when that cornerstone crumbled,
She felt suddenly alone, completely unanchored and adrift, almost like she was back in that desolate wasteland of 2002. She says, really poignantly, that her two primary sources of stability were now adrift themselves.
I found myself questioning that a little reading it.
Yeah.
How could she genuinely equate the trauma of a divorce, even a painful one, with the horror of a violent kidnapping? It feels counterintuitive.
It does. But her reflection on the relativity of pain, that anecdote she shares about her college roommate,
Yeah.
that brings it all home,
Right.
that anecdote is the key to understanding trauma in this book. It shows that trauma is relative, it's deeply personal. You just can't measure it by external standards.
Her roommate couldn't relate, basically.
Right. Her roommate said, I can't even imagine what you went through. And Elizabeth offered this profound clarity. She said, we all have a different set of scales.
That's powerful.
And she explained that while the kidnapping was, of course, horrific, the divorce felt just as hard because it destroyed the very foundational safety structure she had relied on for the past decade to recover from the first trauma.
So it wasn't the event itself, but what the event took away.
Precisely. It was the removal of her entire support foundation.
That's a crucial insight for anyone dealing with loss. Trauma isn't a single neat arrow hitting one target. It's more like a blast that just hurts indiscriminately.
And the scale of it is internal. It's personalized. What might seem like a small thing to one person, a job loss, a separation, can be a seismic, devastating shifts for someone else because of their unique psychological history.
It's all about what the event takes away from you, not what the event is.
And that's the core message early on. We can't judge or compare rock slides. The sense of loss is profound, and it's valid, regardless of how trivial the event might seem to outsiders. The book gives you permission to mourn your personal losses without needing someone else to validate their severity.
Loss is loss, and grief is grief.
And this emotional acceptance of loss leads directly into the core solution the book offers, which is taking ownership of the detour.
Getting in the driver's seat.
Exactly. She makes it so clear that you must claim the driver's seat, because if you don't actively steer the wheel, nobody else can do it for you. This fierce reclaiming of agency is where real, sustained healing begins.
It's how a forced diversion becomes a path you consciously choose to navigate.
And the airport analogy is just a brilliant, immediate way to understand this need for agency.
So she and her husband, Matthew, they're stuck in traffic on I-80. There's a serious rock slide up ahead in Parley's Canyon.
And they are running late. She has a flight to a critical advocacy event that she absolutely cannot miss.
So they're facing a perfect psychological roadblock. The immovable fact that the planned, known route is completely closed.
And they had three choices. They could wait indefinitely for some miracle clearance, they could give up and just concede failure, or they could take a monumental risk.
And they took the risk.
They did. They opted for a literal long shot. An unknown dirt road near Jeremy Ranch, flying completely blind, no GPS, no cell service, and the phone just kept flashing that useless instruction, return to route.
And that phrase, return to route, that's the profound mirror for her deepest psychological wish when she was 15.
To rewind time.
To just go back to life before the kidnapping. And she realized so vividly in that moment that trying to go back was impossible. Psychologically, the only thing you get from going back is stuck.
So that risk, that willingness to drive forward into the complete unknown, was the only way to make meaningful progress and get to her destination.
And when we talk about the psychological roadblock, we're really talking about the trap of rumination.
That's it. The roadblock is the reality that the planned route is closed, and the trap is getting stuck mentally. Either waiting for the impossible to happen, for the old reality to come back, or just torturing yourself with the endless cycle of what-ifs.
That is the mental idling that just exhausts us, staring endlessly at the obstruction.
And she explains that this cycle of rumination, focusing constantly on, I can't believe it happened, or if only I'd done X, it's not just emotionally draining, it's actively destructive to our long-term health.
And it's neurologically significant, isn't it?
Yeah, hugely. Dwelling on negativity creates what she calls neurological superhighways for those negative thoughts. These are literally reinforced pathways in the brain.
Wow.
And the thoughts just race through these highly efficient highways, keeping you hyper-aroused, hindering new relationships, and negatively impacting your physical health. It's an internal mental block that it perpetually prohibits forward movement.
So the solution isn't fighting the past. It's radically accepting the roadblock.
Yeah.
Accepting that reality has changed forever.
And then utilizing the brain's neuroplasticity to consciously reroute those pathways toward a new course. You literally have to build new positive roads in your brain.
But that sounds like a massive undertaking. I mean, she talks about taking a risk, that long dirt road without cell service, which implies a lot of agency and energy. What about for you, the listener, if you're dealing with a roadblock right now and feels so emotionally depleted that you just don't have the mental capacity to take a risk like that?
Well, she addresses that. She says the first act of agency isn't movement at all. It's permission.
Which brings us to the first essential stop on her detour map, Rest Stop 1.
Yes. Rest Stop 1 is, allow yourself to grieve the lost path and the destinations that disappeared with it. Avoid the trap of comparison.
She stresses that profound loss is profound loss, no matter how trivial it might seem to an outsider. She details grieving the loss of her intact family unit, and she confesses that even 6 years later, she still sometimes wished things would magically return to how they were.
It's permission to stop rushing the process.
And this is where she offers that profound reframing of grief that really stuck with me. She starts with that popular notion, grief is just love with no place to go, but she adapts it for the detour experience.
Grief is hope with no place to go.
That phrase is a total game changer, isn't it?
It is. It instantly turns grief from this empty, paralyzing chasm into a reservoir of potential energy. It means the hope isn't lost or extinguished, it's just changed its address, waiting for a new destination to attach itself to.
So that hope is the fuel.
It's the water, the gasoline, the binoculars that sustain you and give you the strength to move beyond the immediate mess of the rock slide. You redirect that hope into building the new path.
The other dangerous trap here is the comparison trap, where society tries to classify trauma. She calls them rock slide boxes.
Right, like labeling a hostage situation as level 3 with a prescribed 6 months, 1 year recovery window.
These external reductive categories are so insidious because they make it easy to pass judgment or belittle someone else's emotional experience, or even worse, your own.
Yeah, you convince yourself that your trauma wasn't bad enough to warrant the pain you're feeling. And if you don't fit into the box, you feel like you're failing the recovery process.
It creates these false, set expectations for recovery time and trajectory. It turns something complex and non-linear into a simplistic, easy-to-judge label.
And the truth she insists upon is that all these labels, all these expectations and comparisons, they ultimately just cut us off from genuine connection and self-compassion. If we spend time comparing our rock slide to someone else's, we stop moving on our own detour. And this issue of being categorized and judged by external measures, well, it leads us straight into the public's immediate and pervasive misdiagnosis of her behavior during captivity.
The assumption of Stockholm Syndrome.
Exactly. That's a label that was slapped onto her immediately by the media, by amateur psychologists. The public saw her silence, her seeming compliance.
Like not answering her Uncle David's call, or outwardly supporting Mitchell's story during the rescue.
And they just jumped to the convenient, sensational label, Stockholm Syndrome, the idea that she bonded with or felt sympathy for her captors.
But her rebuttal is so clear and unequivocal.
I did not have Stockholm Syndrome. She stresses that she loathed them. Her compliance was not a sign of sympathy. It was purely an active, rational, moment-to-moment strategy for survival.
In a life or death situation.
Right. And she details the reality of that compliance, which was driven by immediate, acute physical fear. For instance, when she heard Uncle David's call in the tent, Mitchell was physically pressing his body against her, murmuring death threats, promising to kill both her and her uncle if she made a sound.
So silence was the only choice.
It was the only choice that guaranteed both their lives.
And the library anecdote, when the detective approached them, that reinforces this concept of forced compliance.
It does. Barzee silently but deeply buried her sharp nails into the author's thigh, a physical threat. And it reinforced Mitchell's manipulative use of religion to prevent the detective from removing her veil and confirming her identity. Her silence in that moment was appeasement, not affection.
Even during the eventual rescue, her initial hesitation wasn't bonding. It was just deep-seated, justifiable paranoia.
She was afraid it was another trick. Because it broke the silence. It broke the appeasement strategy she had used for 9 months.
The conclusion she draws shifts the focus entirely. I lived. I am here to tell you my story. In my book, that is plenty.
It's an affirmation that survival is the goal, and the tactics you employ to achieve it are sacred. They shouldn't be judged.
To really understand why those reactions happen, though, and to validate her experience beyond those external labels, she introduces the scientific insights of Dr. Rebecca Bailey,
a leading psychologist specializing in complex trauma. And this helps us move past the victim blaming inherent in the Stockholm Syndrome label.
Dr. Bailey's framework centers on what's called bottom-up processing. This is essential.
It is. It means survival responses are autonomic. They're automatic, reflexive, and largely separate from conscious thought. They happen in a nanosecond.
An innate precognitive pull for survival.
Exactly. It precedes interaction with the higher thinking brain. The body senses danger and reacts immediately to avoid being completely overwhelmed. It's a primal, fast-track response.
We all learn about the classic fight or flight responses, which is what the public expected of her, right? A physical struggle or an escape attempt.
But modern trauma theory, particularly polyvagal theory from Dr. Stephen Porges, argues that the current model focuses too heavily on just those two visible responses. It misses several other critical, less understood survival modes.
So beyond fight or flight, what are we talking about?
Well, there's freeze, which is often a dissociative state where the victim is fully aware but just unable to move or speak. It's an overwhelmed nervous system shutdown, playing dead.
And then fawn.
Fawn is a complicated response involving deliberately compliant, non-threatening behavior used to please the threat source and actively de-escalate danger. You become agreeable or useful.
But Dr. Bailey's specific focus, and the one that perfectly explains the author's 9 months of silence and compliance, is appeasement.
Appeasement is incredibly nuanced. Dr. Bailey argues it's an entirely unconscious social engagement response aimed at co-regulating the perpetrator's nervous system.
Co-regulating the perpetrator's nervous system. So what does that actually mean?
Think of it as a primal tactic. The victim uses subtle cues of safety like maintaining eye contact, keeping a non-threatening proximity, or using a warm, calm tone to reduce the likelihood of violence.
So by engaging socially like that,
you convince the perpetrator's nervous system, their raw animal brain, that you're not a threat. That calms their danger response and it buys you time.
Wow, that reframes compliance entirely. It's not surrender, and it's certainly not bonding.
It is an active, unconscious, highly refined survival strategy designed to minimize violence and increase your chances of living long enough to be rescued or to escape.
Dr. Bailey says she got into this field expecting to find classical, learned helplessness.
The idea that people eventually stop trying to escape if the trauma is unavoidable, but when she met survivors like Elizabeth, she realized this is not giving up.
It was a highly active mechanism to stay alive.
And it requires immense internal strength to override that desire to fight and instead choose the highly calculated risk of appeasement.
And the notion of learned helplessness, much like the Stockholm Syndrome label, often carries a strong element of blame, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It shifts the focus onto the victim's perceived inaction. Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you scream? Rather than placing the full responsibility on the perpetrator's violence and coercive control.
The comparison trap resurfaces here as well. She notes that society is often quicker to praise victims who exhibit the visible dramatic actions of fight or flight.
We have to drop those expectations. All labels and all expectations of how trauma should be experienced are, in her final assessment, pointless and reductive. We have to acknowledge the diversity of human experience and response without judgment.
Okay, so understanding the science of survival is one thing, but once you accept the trauma, the next challenge is, well, it's maintaining forward momentum.
And that brings us to Elizabeth's incredible sustained effort, the marathon analogy.
Which is such a brilliant way to explain commitment toward goals without punishing yourself for not hitting arbitrary timelines. Her specific goal was qualifying for the Boston Marathon.
And she trained rigorously. She ran her fastest race yet, a massive personal achievement. But ultimately, she was 7 minutes too slow to qualify for Boston.
The immediate emotional response was devastating failure.
Of course, a sense of having fallen short despite pouring everything into it. But the crucial lesson she drew was profoundly applicable to trauma recovery. Don't treat recovery timelines as failures.
Her failure was still a personal best.
Exactly. Progress had been made, and the only true timeline for success was the one she had built in her own head. The goal is progress, not perfection.
And Dr. Bailey reinforces this point. She points out that we are far too quick to put deadlines on unresolved grief or trauma.
Right. If external circumstances, like still living in an unsafe environment or lacking emotional or financial stability, are unresolved, it's not a moral failure or a sign of weakness if healing is delayed.
You can't be expected to run a marathon if you haven't secured your basic needs first.
The danger is allowing that perceived failure to qualify for Boston or to meet some arbitrary recovery timeline to turn into blame and self-recrimination.
And she identifies self-blame as a progress killer.
She says it's often a cop-out driven by sheer exhaustion because psychologically it takes less energy to shut down and say, I am worthless, than it does to put in the hard, consistent work toward improvement.
Self-blame is a form of giving up without realizing it.
And sometimes, she notes, even professional help, though well-meaning, can be what she calls bad medicine.
How so?
She observed that some therapists can unintentionally send the message that you are fundamentally broken for life.
And that tragically removes the survivor's sense of voluntary control over their future. It leads to emotional shutdown. I mean, if you're told you're permanently broken, why bother trying to fix it?
She uses the horrific bad doctor analogy to illustrate the destructive power of the inner critic.
This one really landed for me.
Imagine a doctor diagnosing a severe illness and then immediately blaming the patient. It's all your fault you got sick. I know you won't ever learn, so there's no point in treating you.
You would instantly reject that doctor. You'd say they have terrible ethics and zero credibility.
Exactly. And yet, she points out, we allow our inner critic to use that exact language with us. I am worthless. It's all my fault. You'll never change.
That hits hard because we all have that inner critic whispering to us. Just recognizing that voice is bad medicine is maybe the biggest internal shift this book offers.
And the practical solution is reframing. Those closed loops of self-blame, like it's all my fault, they have to be turned into complicated, open, productive questions.
Like, why did I make the choices I made? What information was I missing? How can I make better choices in the future?
That shift reclaims agency and forces productive introspection rather than just simple self-punishment.
This psychological shift feeds directly into Rest Stop 2.
Recognize the ways your detour has changed you. Give yourself grace in that change.
And the crucial insight here is that trauma doesn't change who we are. Our inherent dignity remains, but it absolutely changes what we need to feel safe and functional.
And that change in needs often leads to these confusing, destructive, temporary coping mechanisms.
She gives the hypothetical example of Max, the rape survivor, who started drinking heavily.
Right. His emotional wound needed healing and connection, but the alcohol was just numbing the pain, a temporary, destructive stand-in for his true need for safety and comfort.
It gives relief, but it doesn't solve the underlying need.
And Max's situation highlights the difficulty of charting a course when your internal GPS is dark or scrambled. The way forward requires going back to basics.
The book stresses the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique.
Identifying 5 things you see, 4 you hear, 3 you touch, 2 you smell, and 1 you taste. It's a healthy, immediate way to reconnect with your mind and body.
And it's not just a distraction technique, is it?
Not at all. It forces your autonomic nervous system to recognize you are in the present and in a safe environment. It pulls you out of that freeze or hyper-aroused survival state and back into your thinking, rational brain.
This process forces you to identify your current fundamental needs: physical comfort, emotional safety, pain relief. And then you have to ask, which practices truly satisfy those needs versus the temporary destructive stand-ins?
The final piece of this section is finding the right help, which she cleverly calls gene therapy.
I love this analogy.
Just because a specific pair of genes or a specific type of therapy works for everyone else doesn't mean it's the right fit for your unique body and journey.
Her initial negative experience with male psychiatrists led her to resist talk therapy entirely after the kidnapping.
Yet, years later, after the second rock slide, the divorce, her needs changed completely.
That crisis destroyed her foundation of emotional safety.
And the situation suddenly required the very thing she had hated before: structured talk therapy. It helped her build essential emotional boundaries and stability in her chaotic new family dynamic.
So what works for one detour might not work for another.
And we shouldn't overlook the simple, unexpected practices that work for her immediately after the abduction.
Exercising independence, time with her grandpa's horses, and playing the harp.
These were unconscious, nonverbal therapies, equine and music that provided routine, perspective, and a non-judgmental connection that she just couldn't tolerate from humans at that time. And this movement away from isolation and toward community is paramount, which leads us directly to rest stop 3.
Resist the urge to isolate. Pursue connection fearlessly.
The data on this is overwhelming. Isolation is catastrophic for mental, emotional, and physical health. It leads to anxiety, depression, paranoia, often mirroring the damaging effects you see in solitary confinement.
The story she shares about her cousin Olivia illustrates this deep, lonely need for connection, even in the most terrifying circumstances.
In captivity, she mentioned her cousin to Mitchell, which then led him to formulate a plan to kidnap Olivia as well. When he failed, the author felt immense relief, of course.
But also a pinprick of sadness.
And that initial flicker of disappointment wasn't selfish in the way we might initially judge it. It was driven by the deep, isolated need for someone, anyone, to understand her pain.
And the pragmatic, desperate hope that together they could find a way to escape.
She makes a striking observation. No one ever tells fairy tales about two princesses in the tower.
Why?
Because they would have already found their own way out. Connection equals capability.
That human need for co-regulation, where one nervous system helps stabilize another, is powerfully backed by science.
The book references the Cohen, Schaefer, and Davidson study from 2006, sometimes called Lending a Hand.
The study was simple but profound. When women faced the threat of an electric shock, holding a stranger's hand significantly decreased neural activation in the brain's threat centers.
The areas that registered danger and pain.
And holding a spouse's hand amplified this soothing, stabilizing effect even further.
So in essence, supportive social connection doesn't just make you feel better, it literally stabilizes your nervous system and diminishes the physical experience of threat, pain, and stress.
Which highlights exactly why isolation hurts. It starves the body of the co-regulation it desperately needs to stabilize and heal.
But as we discussed, trauma can make intimacy and vulnerability terrifying. If your nervous system's on high alert, receiving oxytocin or deep connection can feel like a dangerous opening.
And this is where healing with animals often comes into play. The magic of the horses, she describes.
They don't care about your past trauma. They meet you entirely in the present moment. They demand attention, trust, and responsibility, forcing her to be fully present, a reset button away from court cases and the shadows of her past.
Dr. Bailey emphasizes this quiet power of connection and co-regulation. The respectful collaboration between a human and a horse releases oxytocin, the cuddle hormone, through touch and care.
And that is absolutely vital because trauma can twist the experience of oxytocin and intimacy, making those feelings scary or unsafe.
So equine therapy allows people to tolerate connection.
To learn how to feel safe and nurtured in a relationship without the complex risk of human interaction. It's a low-stakes way to rebuild the capacity for trust, thereby building the internal relational home necessary for future human bonds.
When you're looking for this crucial support, she makes a very critical distinction, one that many survivors need to hear.
Proximity is not the same as support.
She cites the painful experience of being invited onto Nancy Grace's show to advocate for a legislative bill, only to be repeatedly asked invasive, re-traumatizing personal questions instead of discussing the policy.
That experience reinforced how critical it is to choose your circle wisely, to choose people who don't reduce you to a headline, who don't make your pain about their own curiosity or their own agenda.
The wrong people, even if they're physically nearby or well-meaning on the surface, can drag you back into that cycle of rumination and pain.
While the right people help you breathe deeper and keep moving forward on your detour.
And finally, the ultimate barrier to pursuing that fearless connection is shame.
Shame is the psychological padlock that enforces isolation. It is the inner critic amplified 1,000 times over, convincing us we are broken beyond repair.
And that our rock slide was somehow our fault, or a sign of our weakness.
Shame is the monster under the bed. It thrives entirely in the dark corners of isolation. The solution is to shine a light on it through fearless connection and sharing your story.
As the Elizabeth Smart Foundation teaches through its We Believe You campaign, the shame is on the perpetrator, never on the survivor.
And that bold step toward visibility and advocacy, turning the worst pain into a beacon for others, is the ultimate pursuit of connection and freedom. The hard work of the detour, the commitment to connection, and the reframing of the inner critic, it all leads us to the ultimate necessary destination, finding new joys and ultimately experiencing post-traumatic growth. PTG. And Rest Stop 4 is the conscious practice of this growth. Reflect on new and unexpected destinations. Take inventory of joys, big and small.
This isn't just about celebrating big advocacy victories. It's recognizing the mundane moments that become magical when seen in context. Drinking cold water, skiing in the sun, simply preparing a family meal safely in your own kitchen.
Things that were once impossible or terrifying.
This clarity of perspective is often captured poetically in the book. She cites Rumi's powerful observation. The wound is the place where the light enters you.
And this light doesn't erase the pain or the scar. It provides clarity. It illuminates the path toward the strength, resilience, and good we already possess, but which the trauma obscured.
This concept is backed up by serious research. Tedeschi and Calhoun's seminal study on PTG show that a significant percentage of trauma survivors report positive growth across 5 key categories,
which map perfectly onto the lessons learned on her detour.
So let's break those 5 categories down, because they show the concrete results of navigating a detour successfully.
First, relating to others. This includes an increased empathy for others going through hardship and an expanded, supportive social circle. It directly fulfills the push for connection we discussed at Rest Stop 3.
You realize your suffering isn't unique, but your strength can be shared.
Second, new possibilities. Finding new passions, new life priorities, or career paths. Her personal shift from pursuing a dream as a music teacher to becoming a global advocate is the perfect example of this.
And her father was instrumental in encouraging that new direction. He told her, "You are the one who is best positioned to talk about this."
Third is personal strength. The profound realization of personal resilience, discovering in the aftermath that she was inherently tough, resourceful, and brave. This links right back to Rest Stop 2, recognizing that the detour didn't break her, it forged her.
Then there's spiritual change.
Finding an unexpected, deeper connection to something greater than oneself, which for her meant learning to believe in miracles and having a profound sense of life's purpose.
And finally, appreciation of life. An acute moment-to-moment awareness of the beautiful, small things in existence, which connects directly to the mandate of Rest Stop for taking inventory of joy.
And her most compelling personal example of PTG falls under that relating to others category concerning the fallout from her parents' divorce.
That second rock slide. While it was initially devastating, it forced a necessary new relationship with her father, independent of her mother.
They built, in her words, a healthier and stronger father-daughter bond, providing her with a new and powerful lifeline that wasn't reliant on the old broken foundation.
Dr. Bailey captures this evolution perfectly with her puzzle metaphor.
Right. A rock slide scrambles life's puzzle entirely, but the detour forces you to pick up new, strangely shaped pieces. The choice is to adapt, assimilate those new pieces, and move on to a new puzzle with even more pieces.
One that is more complex, but ultimately richer and more robust than the original.
This successful journey to advocacy brings us to a painful but necessary reality addressed in the book.
The systemic bias involved in public visibility and rescue efforts.
She is unflinching in her self-awareness. Her own recovery and rescue were significantly aided by her privilege, being a blonde, white, middle-class girl.
Which guaranteed constant, sustained media coverage and massive law enforcement resources.
And that level of visibility is absolutely critical in missing persons cases because resources follow attention.
She contrasts her experience sharply with the cases of 2 missing Black girls, Alexis Patterson and Ashley Nora,
who vanished that exact same year, 2002, but received disproportionately less national attention and media scrutiny.
And this lack of equitable focus reflects a much broader, deeply concerning crisis in the U.S.
The book stresses that nearly 40% of missing persons cases involve people of color, with Black Americans making up 38% of those cases, despite being only 14% of the population.
This systemic disparity means that the lack of public attention often translates directly into a lack of resources and, tragically, a lack of successful outcomes.
And this injustice, the book insists, cannot be ignored as part of the survivors' larger homecoming. It is everyone's fight. We have to support activists and organizations like Natalie Wilson of the Black and Missing Foundation and Native Hope, who are fighting for equity and visibility.
Elizabeth Smart recognizes that her own detour required privilege, and therefore, her PTG demands using that platform to fight for those who lack it.
Finally, she returns to the two great pillars of voluntary control and psychological happiness, referencing the work of Martin Seligman. She notes that focusing on the present is critical, because focusing obsessively on the past magnifies inertia.
It keeps you psychologically stuck.
And the final tools she provides for navigating the detour are gratitude and forgiveness. Gratitude actively works to amplify the savoring and appreciation of the good events in your life.
Building those positive neurological superhighways.
And forgiveness, forgiving the perpetrators, forgiving those who hurt you, and perhaps most importantly, forgiving yourself, loosens the power of the bad events to embitter.
Don't let bitterness or resentment act as extra weight, all those unnecessary pebbles and dust on your journey. We have the voluntary power to choose resilience and consciously reframe our negative thoughts into achievable positive habits.
Building that new puzzle piece by piece. So we return to the question that launched this entire deep dive in this entire book.
But Elizabeth, how did you survive?
Yeah.
With everything that happened to you, how can you possibly be okay?
And the ultimate answer she lands on is wonderfully simple. It rejects the need for external validation or comparison.
The how doesn't matter.
It doesn't. If the things you are doing, your small choices, your new routines, your efforts toward connection, if they are making you healthier, stronger, and happier than you were yesterday, that is the only metric that counts.
That is the only measure of success on your detour.
The fact that she can look back at the treacherous, dark paths she was thrust onto and see a transformed landscape towering cliff faces and deep canyons, a path that is now brutal, unforgiving, and above all, breathtakingly beautiful, that is the definition of true homecoming.
It is a new earned beauty.
The incredible lasting changes we make in ourselves, this profound post-traumatic growth, are possible precisely because we are not defined by what happened to us. We are defined by the fierce, persistent desire to see the sun again.
To create light in the wound.
We are not our rock slides. We are still ourselves, but maybe with a few new, strangely shaped pieces that build a far more complex and interesting whole.
I will leave you, the learner, with this final provocative thought from writer Christine Caine, which perfectly encapsulates the journey Elizabeth Smart describes.
Sometimes when you are in a dark place, you think you have been buried, but you've actually been planted.
Consider what unexpected bloom your personal detour might be preparing you to reveal to the world.